What's going on, boys and girls? So we are here with another video. This one is from Xiomaro again. He's been hitting positive. You know, he's 3 for 3 on the channel so far. He's my go-to when I want like intelligent Linux content that doesn't make me want to bang my head against the wall. So this one is entitled "How to Play Games on Linux." I've enjoyed his journey into the land of Linux and the open-minded approach that he's taking to stuff. Like, it's refreshing because he doesn't come to it with a particular mindset, which I think really in the long term ends up helping him as a user more than I think he actually knows. So let's roll into this and see what he's got to say about how to play games in Linux.
Hello everyone, my name is Xiomaro and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be doing a quick guide to getting yourself started with gaming on Linux. I'm going to need to do another guide in the future on getting Linux installed on your system in the first place, but for this video I'm presuming you already have Linux installed. I'm also sticking to the essentials for this video, so I'm not going to be looking at stuff like CPU governors, virtual machines, custom kernels or any of that sort of thing. This guide is aimed at newer users to help you get the basic gaming functionality you might expect from your operating system. But what I am going to be going through is getting your graphics drivers, mouse drivers, disabling mouse acceleration, and then getting your games up and running through Steam and Lutris. So first off, which distro should you use? Okay. I said I'm presuming you already have Linux installed and ready to go, but the distro you're using does affect some of the... Ask
a room full of 100 Linux users, you'll get 100 different Linux distros. The death knell of any question as it relates to Linux. What distro? Oh boy. But I am curious to see what he has to say.
Instructions I'm going to give you. And actually the reason I'm doing this guide before a guide to installing Linux is because I want to use just one distro as an example and I'm not sure which one yet. But needless to say, Google or whichever search engine you prefer is your friend when you're trying to solve a problem, as I mentioned in my other video about the Linux mindset. With that being said, I'm going to be using Pop! OS and Manjaro in my examples because, at least in my opinion, they're the easiest distros for getting your games and gaming hardware working.
I would agree with you with Pop! OS. Manjaro, I'm a Manjaro guy, and I would have a hard time making that recommendation. There's some nuances with rolling distros that can be potentially dangerous. I mean, any OS can break, but whether or not you know how to fix that breakage is another story. And with the more of the LTS kind of static releases, I think you're going to find that breakage is still possible. I mean, everything breaks. It's just going to be less likely to introduce breakage. Whereas every time a Plasma update comes into Manjaro and you have, 140 different packages that are getting updated or, just random stuff like that, it introduces a lot of other stuff and a lot of other potential things that can create conflicts. Whereas the static releases, what you see is what you get. What's in the repos is what's there. Not a lot of stuff. You'll get security updates, but you're not going to get much else. So, just my take. But Pop! OS, yes. Manjaro, I can see it, but I wouldn't recommend it personally.
So let's get started with graphics drivers. If you're on a desktop computer, this is pretty simple. Distros like Manjaro and Pop! OS make installing your graphics drivers super easy. In the case of Pop! OS, you'll have noticed on their website that you download either the open source AMD/Intel image or the proprietary NVIDIA one. This makes things really easy for a new user because you'll have your graphics drivers installed and up to date from the get-go. In the case of Manjaro, before you start
I would like to point out, since 1904, Ubuntu based distros are now rolling with the most, not all. I can't speak for like the outliers like Elementary and stuff. The Ubuntu flavors are shipping with the NVIDIA proprietary blob as well now. So there is that.
installing the distro, you can choose free or non-free graphics drivers. And once Manjaro is installed, you can always go to the hardware detection in the Manjaro settings manager. And from there, you can choose to automatically install open source or proprietary drivers. Long story short, if you're using an NVIDIA graphics card, you'll want to go with the proprietary or non-free option. And for everything else, the open source drivers are the way to go. Now, if you're using a laptop with NVIDIA Optimus, you're gonna have a few more issues, and right now the solution is never particularly elegant. Manjaro automatically gives you Bumblebee, which functions in a similar way to how Windows handles it, but it has some performance overhead, doesn't support Vulkan, and therefore isn't really viable for gaming. Pop! OS is probably the better option here because it gives you Optimus Switch. If you're using the default GNOME desktop on Pop! OS, you can switch between NVIDIA and Intel drivers using the system menu at the top right of your desktop. The only issue with this is that you have to reboot to switch between the two. Now, there is a way to run on Intel graphics but open a second X server using NVIDIA graphics, but setting that up is beyond the scope of this video. For beginners, I would recommend just going with Pop! OS if you're using a laptop with NVIDIA Optimus. Next up, let's look at disabling mouse acceleration.
Now, what you are specifically talking about is prime, dr_prime = 1. It's not hard, it's just annoying. In Steam, you just have to tag that to every single launch option in order for the GPU to be used. It's capital DRI_capital prime = 1 percentile command percentile. And that'll use your dedicated GPU. Now, NVIDIA has added Prime within, I believe, the X server settings application, I believe, on their newest release for their drivers. So props on them for finally not treating Linux like total second-class citizens on its drivers and not making me choose between either the Intel driver or the NVIDIA driver. And nothing in between, because Bumblebee is a hack and not viable for gaming, in my opinion. So Pop! OS is the default right now for gaming. If you game, I'm gonna recommend Pop! OS all day.
Acceleration. If you're a serious gamer, this is something you'll notice in Linux right away. Mouse acceleration is on by default with most distros. One notable exception to this is Linux Mint, so kudos to them. But if you're on pretty much any other distro, it'll probably be on. This is something you'll almost certainly want to disable as a gamer. On Pop! OS, you simply need to go to your mouse and touchpad settings and disable mouse acceleration from there. On other distros, the solution may vary. If you're using KDE as your desktop environment, disabling mouse acceleration will be in the system settings, just like with Pop! OS. And if you're using GNOME, the simplest way is to just install GNOME tweaks through your package manager, open it up, go to keyboard and mouse and find acceleration profile. Change that to flat and you're done. For other desktop environments and distros, I would definitely recommend just having a search on Google. I'm sorry to give you a just Google it answer, but due to the vast number of distros out there, if I told you to edit X or Y config and that's not how it works on your distro, I would be doing you a disservice. Next up, mouse drivers. Almost all mice should work right out of the gate. The reason you might want your mouse drivers though is to set polling rates, set your DPI, and maybe some more advanced stuff like changing what each button does on your mouse or setting the RGB lighting if that's your thing. First of all, you'll need to identify which mouse drivers, if any, will work for your mouse. For Razer mice, you have Polychromatic and OpenRazer. For Logitech, SteelSeries, and a few other mice, you have LibRatBag and Piper. And for Corsair, you have CKB Next. This is where Manjaro makes things quite a lot easier for you. The quickest and easiest way to get these drivers installed is to go to your package manager, go to Preferences, then AUR, and enable AUR support. After that, you can just search for the relevant drivers and get them installed. On Pop! OS or other Ubuntu-based distros, you'll need to add PPAs to get your drivers. For Polychromatic, which is for Razer devices, you can go to their website and take a look at the installation instructions for Ubuntu. For Logitech and a few other devices, you'll want to get Piper and LibRatBag installed. Same thing as with Polychromatic, your best bet is to go to their website and follow the instructions for Ubuntu. With most of these things, it should just work the same way for Pop! OS. Just like with disabling mouse acceleration, there are so many gaming mice on the market, so it would be impossible to give you instructions for every mouse and distro combination. Most rolling release distros, I have to say, make getting mouse drivers a lot easier than their Ubuntu-based counterparts. So Manjaro might be a good bet if you're having trouble getting mouse drivers on another distro. For example, at the time of making this video, the Corsair drivers for Linux don't actually have a package that works on Ubuntu-based distros, and that includes Pop! OS. You could probably get hold of the source code and compile it from that, but that's a little bit beyond beginners. So, now that you've got your hardware working hopefully, let's move on to getting your games installed and running. And there are two pieces of software you'll want to download.
If you guys notice, I don't have a whole lot to say. His points are pretty solid. I don't have much to yell and scream about. So I'm sorry, this is going to be a pretty boring reaction video. Xiomaro, you're going 4 for 4, dude. Like, come on. Give me something. Give me some amount of stupid I can yell and scream about.
To make this very easy for you. First up, Steam. Steam is an absolute godsend for Linux gamers. Not only can you search the store for games that are Linux compatible, you can even get games that aren't Linux native working a lot of the time thanks to Proton. On Manjaro, Steam is actually installed by default, and on Pop! OS all you need to do is go to the Pop Shop and install Steam from there. Once you have Steam installed, if you want to run native Linux games or whitelisted games on Proton, you should just be able to install them and run them with basically no additional steps. However, you can get a lot of non-whitelisted Windows games working as well, but to do that you'll have to take an extra step. To do this, go to Steam Settings, go to Steam Play, and then tick Enable Steam Play for all other titles. Now, fair warning here, not every non-whitelisted game is going to work, but there are a surprising number of games that do actually work, and the best way to find out what works is to go to protondb.com. ProtonDB is a third-party site that allows users to share whether or not they can get their Steam games working through Proton. It's a really useful resource to find out, first, will a game work before you buy it, and second, are there any extra steps you need to take to get it working flawlessly. With non-whitelisted games, your mileage may vary, but I've had pretty decent success getting things running so far. For example, I bought Risk of Rain 2 a month or so ago, and it worked pretty much flawlessly with no additional setup. Battlerite, on the other hand, has some FPS stutter that doesn't seem to be fixable. All in all though, Steam and ProtonDB are great resources to get the majority of your games working. If, however, the games you want to play aren't on Steam, you have another option, Lutris. This is another game changer for Linux users. To get this installed on both Manjaro and Pop! OS, you'll just need to go to the package manager and install Lutris. After that, make your way over to lutris.net and have a search for the game you want to play. Depending on the game you want to play, there may be some instructions you need to follow first. For example, for Overwatch, you'll need to install some packages in order to get the Battle.net launcher working. But luckily, the install instructions do a great job of guiding you through the process. Once you've done that though, it's as simple as clicking install on the website and you should be good to go. Just like with Steam and Proton, your mileage may vary with getting games running through Lutris. But if you make sure to check the website and have a read through the install instructions and some of the user issues, you can get a surprising amount of games working. One thing to note is, most of the games that don't work on Linux through Steam or Lutris are down to crappy anti-cheat software. If these issues ever get resolved, and unfortunately it kinda has to come from the anti-cheat software, a lot of the games that don't currently work suddenly will work. So fingers crossed Easy Anti-Cheat and the like get their act together. Now, I know this guide has been fairly basic and there are a number of steps you can take to get better performance on Linux. But even so, this guide should serve its purpose as a quick start guide for new users who just want to get their games working. Now, I'm sure some of you thought it would be a lot more difficult to get up and running with gaming on Linux, but actually these days, thanks to Steam and Lutris, it's never been easier to play games on Linux. I've been using it now almost exclusively for 2.5 months, and I have to say, I'm actually very happy with my setup. And I say almost exclusively because I'm still dual booting with Windows to use the Adobe suite, but that's something that I'm looking to change at some point. I'll probably put together a more advanced guide at some point in the future, but I'm going to need to do a little more research before that happens. And actually, I'd really appreciate some feedback from you guys on that. Let me know what you'd recommend to squeeze a little more performance out of your games on Linux. Also, look out for my Linux installation guide that I'll be putting together soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more gaming guides, news and discussion. And don't forget to check out the links below to Patreon, Discord and Twitch. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.
And Xiomaro knocks it out of the park again. I actually appreciate kind of the high level overview, not getting down to the nitty gritty, like 30-minute videos on how to do stuff sometimes. I think that can overwhelm new users. And that's something I really appreciate about his content. Recommendation: if you're using NVIDIA, green with envy. If you want to get some more performance, that's essentially fan control. Think MSI Afterburner or anything similar. That's kind of what that is on the Linux end for your NVIDIA cards. There's an AMD one that I don't remember off the top of my head, but all his recommendations are fine. Like it's straight to the point, but they're realist. They're not over promising or not over promising and under delivering. They're very to the point. And see, this is the content that I like, and this is the content that, like, as Linux users, we need to be supporting, because you get the other end of the spectrum who are not the most genuine people. Let's put it that way. And they overpromise, and you get the things Windows doesn't do that Linux can, and all the other stuff. And yes, Linux can game, but with caveats. Windows can game with caveats. Mac OS, the thing behind me, the Mac can game with caveats. Everything's got caveats, and it's refreshing to see someone understand that. So, Xiomaro, props to you. You're 4 for 4 now. You're making having a ranty video really hard to find, because I don't know. But props to you, dude. I'm hoping you're enjoying your journey into Linux. If you, the one thing is, you said almost exclusively. I'm curious to know what that almost is. I'm assuming it's still the Adobe Sphere or Adobe OS. So let me know what we can do to try to throw some recommendations that might try to get you out of those more than almost. We'll get you like too exclusive. You guys know what to do. All the information in the original video, Patreon link, Indiegogo link if you want some cheap games, and all the stuff is down below. Rate it, subscribe, catch you on the flip. Peace.